All right, so today's topic we're going to talk about is ChatGPT, but then we're going to go a bit deeper than that. We're going to talk about OpenAI and the general AI industry to kind of say how you can use this in your own apps. Now, as a disclaimer about me, I'm not an AI researcher. I'm actually like a regular, full stack web developer that builds business applications. So I don't have like an underlying understanding of like, hey, like what kind of things do we use to do the encoding and decoding of a transformer layer API? Like, this is just terminology I've kind of picked up, right? So I think if you're not coming from a deep researcher level, like most of us aren't, except for maybe the gentleman who's the director of machine learning, right, at RVC, this is going to be helpful because I'm kind of coming at it from the same perspective you are, and I volunteered to give this talk because I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn the layer below the API, because you can't know everything at the deepest level, but you need to know one level below what you're doing, right? Like, if you're a React developer, helps to know JavaScript and not just pure React, right? So a couple kind of ground rules for this talk that give you some preparation for what you're going to experience. This presentation is interactive in a specific way, meaning, well, one, we're going to have pop quizzes as we go through. And I'm going to give you multiple choice, and if you get it right, I'm going to throw a piece of candy at you. Now, this is the fourth time I've done this. One time someone wasn't paying attention, and because the edges of this will catch in the air, it hit him straight in the forehead, the row in front. And then they angrily looked at me, kept the candy, and ate it while staring at me. So when I say heads up, it's literally like, please keep your head up, and I will try not to hit your head. But I just find it's more fun to not have a sort of barrier here, and you get to have an active movement while you're giving me a talk. So let's do one question. Now, the funny thing is, none of the answers to these questions are actually in the slides. Normally, it'd be like, hey, explain something and then see if you listen. This is actually, you can just guess, and the answers are interesting, but they're not in the slides. So the very first known chatbot, known as Eliza, was invented by an MIT researcher in what year? So A, 1966, B, 1972, C, 1991, or D, 1996? So raise your hand and give me, yes, go ahead.
1991.
No. Yeah. D, 1996? No.
No, 72.
No. Oh my God, you guys got all of them wrong.
1966.
All right, all right. Yeah, it was 1966. There you go. So it was a researcher who actually built a therapy chatbot called Eliza, and he meant it to be a caricature of kind of how humans relate. And then he was actually disappointed because people immediately started talking to it as if it was real and serious and telling it all of their life stories. And this is very primitive sort of like pattern matching technology that was not very smart the way that ChatGPT is today. So, but it was an early illustration of how even semi-real looking chatbots would kind of fool us, or at least we would be attached to them. But yeah, 1966, like this is like punch card time, right? Was the first chatbot. All right, so second kind of ground rule. I'm going to demo some stuff later on, right? In fact, you guys are going to get to play with some of the stuff I've built by scanning a QR code and going to a website and playing with it yourself. So it's running, and we will then look at the code. So that's the technical part of this. If you're a developer, we're going to look at the code of that exact thing. So if you're not a developer, that little 25% will not be relevant to you. But shit's going to break while I do that. So be prepared. I'm okay with stuff breaking. Third thing is the concept of sort of prerequisite knowledge, right? So AI is very advanced in how it's implemented. I mean, it's maybe a very small number of people are the PhDs that know how to build all this stuff. And there would be an assumption that to understand and use this stuff, you need a lot of prerequisite knowledge. You need to be one of those PhDs. That's not the truth, right? And the answer really is that artificial intelligence to all the rest of us is just another tool, right? Just like having a tool to change your tire in your car. You can't do it without the tool, and that tool only matters if we use it. Technology, the history of technology is 1,000 projects that people made cool shit and no one used. That's 99% of what all of us are going to honestly work on, is stuff that's going to get ditched in 5 or 10 years. So we are actually the important ones that are actually the users of those tools that make them relevant and impactful in the world. So the power is on our side, and we shouldn't be intimidated by what we're about to see. In fact, I say it's fine for us to know just enough. And that's what the goal of today's talk is, just to know exactly enough to do, to use it effectively in the real world. All right, so those are the ground rules. I'm going to go through just really fast our agenda before we get to the meat. First, we're just going to blow your mind. And that's going to be, if you haven't actually played with ChatGPT, how many of you have actually played with it so far, like created an account? I'd assume so. That's why you're here. So for the few of you that are uninitiated, we're going to have a little bit of show and tell about just playing with it. And if it doesn't actually work, I'm just going to show you a video of what I did. We're going to have chat. That's where we're going to have ChatGPT explain what it is if you don't know. And then we're going to talk about when it's going to take your job. Just kidding. Then we're going to zoom in a little bit. We're going to talk about specifically ChatGPT, who made it, who else is working in this space, how can you use AI tools like this in other ways. And then we're going to zoom out. We're going to do an overview of AI in general, like what's the history of this space, how do you train AI models? And this is not going to be very technical. It's going to be, we love ChatGPT, but like what scope does it fit in? What are the tools like this? What's the actual terminology of how the technology works? We'll talk a little bit about transformer AI models, which is really the groundbreaking technology that sort of powers why ChatGPT is so good versus all the other attempts at this sucked in the past. And then we're actually going to do the technical piece, which is we're going to focus on OpenAI, which is the creator of ChatGPT, and they have APIs if you're a developer you can use today, right? That are like you can sign up for an account, and actually later on this list, as of 2 days ago, Azure, Microsoft's cloud, like has production ready, generally available access to those APIs that you can use. Meaning, like it's not a plaything. Like they're like you can use this in production and pay us for it. Of course, there's the paying them part. And we're going to do demos of the Davinci 3 tool base, which is Davinci 3 is kind of what ChatGPT is based on. Davinci 3.5 is what ChatGPT actually runs. We're going to look at the DALL-E API to generate images, and we're going to look at the embedding API to do sort of text search analysis. Everyone ready to go?
Yeah.
Ready to do this? Yeah. All right. All right. This is actually what I already did. So most of you already used the preview. We're going to skip that one. So let's try it real quick. So I think, let's actually try it. Let's actually try it. Can I like open? Okay.
It's not busy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually why I have the video on there. Maybe I will. Yeah.
So
I didn't actually account for the fact that I'm doing a different screen. That's why it's hard to see. And I can't actually see the. You know what? Screw it. I'm gonna do the video.
I guess it's the first one, right?
Yeah, I just can't see it, so we're just gonna do the video, right? So this is where I'm actually asking ChatGPT to explain ChatGPT, and I'll maximize this for you guys. I will read it out loud because I don't actually know if the people in the back can actually read what it's saying. So I first ask it to explain ChatGPT to have ChatGPT explain itself. So I ask it, explain how amazing ChatGPT is and why it's a hallmark in AI evolution in 2 paragraphs. Pronto. And its response is, can the people in the back read this? It's too small. All right, so I'm going to read it loud. So its response is, ChatGPT is a remarkable achievement in the field of natural language processing, NLP. It is a large language model that has been trained on a massive data set of text, allowing it to generate human-like responses in a wide range of questions and prompts. One of the key features of ChatGPT is the ability to understand content and generate coherent, flowing text, making it a powerful tool for a variety of NLP tasks, such as language translation, text summaries, dialogue systems. In terms of evolution, blah, blah. Okay, it's explaining stuff really, really well. And then I say, dude, that's awesome. And then it responds, I'm glad you think so. As a language model, my main purpose is to assist users in generating human-like text. It's always great to hear that I'm doing a good job. If there's anything else you need help with, feel free to ask me now. And I say, word. And there it says, is there something specific you would like me to help you with? I'm assisting you. So that's again a very like serious thing. Like raise your hand. How many of you have tried this and like what's the coolest thing you found it able to do or the funniest thing you found you were able to ask it to do? Yeah.
I asked it to say something in Jamaican. And it
Yeah.
did pretty well.
It did pretty well in Jamaican. Yeah, yeah.
Wrote a song about my wife.
You said what?
Wrote a song about my
It wrote a song about your wife? Yeah.
I asked it to write a cover letter to the hiring manager.
Cover letter to the high end? Yeah. Yeah.
I asked it to figure out a polite way to call my boss an asshole.
Yeah. Useful. Yeah.
So I asked ChatGPT to create a computer program in Sanskrit language. I heard like NASA is doing some kind of research on Sanskrit language. And they
Wow.
create programming language. And it actually did it when it launched like 1 month ago.
Yeah.
And now they are putting a lot of restrictions right now.
Yeah.
Like, if people are asking anything, how to create a bomb or how to create
Yeah.
a fuel injection.
They're
Right now it's not like capable to do that.
Yeah.
Still it's learning itself.
It is, yeah. All right, cool. Yeah, one more example.
Like every time to think new, to wish someone for the birthday, it's very difficult. So I always ask for ChatGPT. It's very easy.
Well, I'm going to also volunteer, and I put this on the slides. Some of the explanations for some of the concepts you'll see later in the slides, I wrote them, and then I literally asked ChatGPT to write a better version of that, and I liked it better, so I put in there that I just pasted it back into the presentation.
That's so many times.
Yeah, yeah. So pop quiz. What does the GPT in ChatGPT stand for? Graph-based pre-training transformer, generative probabilistic model, generative pre-trained transformer, gloriously plump turkey.
Obviously, D.
All right, you got to raise your hand though. All right, yes, yes, you. Yep. Ah, wish that was it. I wish that was it. You haven't gone yet, right?
Yeah, I think it's C.
It is C.
All right.
Generative pre-trained transformer. Yeah, so this is actually kind of based. This concept of doing what are called the transformer models is only about 5 years old at this point. Like the origin of the paper that was the research paper. So it's brand spanking new, and that's why these models are so good. All right, so let's zoom out. And I didn't want to spend too much time on that. Like just let's play with ChatGPT because you guys have already done that. You know it's cool, right? So let's talk about how we got here, right? And how many of you know of OpenAI? I guess you have to because you've been to the website to use ChatGPT, right? So for those of you that have just been using it as a consumer, OpenAI is the creator of ChatGPT. They were founded in 2015 as a non-profit entity by many players, major players in Silicon Valley. They've received like massive multi-billion-dollar investments, primarily from Microsoft, but the original investment was a consortium of people. Microsoft is not finalized, but they're pretty much about to invest $10 billion into it, valuing it about $29 billion in total. The original investors are Sam Altman, who is the CEO. He's also the guy who used to run Y Combinator for a long time, so I'm sure the Y Combinator guys know him pretty well. All right, if you get to meet him. 29 billion is the current kind of prospective valuation based on the investment by Microsoft. Reid Hoffman was very involved. He's the co-founder of LinkedIn. Peter Thiel, who is famous for PayPal and also political stuff, I guess, at this point. And it's historically attracted a lot of, like the original founding of it was, hey, we're going to be a nonprofit because a lot of the really, really in-depth advanced AI research was done in these sort of like private labs at Facebook and Google, et cetera, and in a very sort of murky, hidden way. And so they wanted to open source their stuff. They literally, the 9 kind of major technical co-founders were like, they all knew each other and they were like, you want to like leave here and like, we're going to take like a 50% pay cut, but we're just going to do some cool shit that's going to be for the betterment of humanity and not just, getting paid a lot of money by Facebook or Google, et cetera. And they took lower salaries, and there's some really funny anecdotes about that for a long time. One of them said that like hiring one of these guys is like these top AI researchers is about like the same salary as paying a top NFL quarterback. So like these guys are not making the hundreds of thousands or 100,000 that you or I could ever hope to get. These guys are in the millions, right? These are the pinnacle. These guys inventing the field, right? And that's who they attracted at the early onset. Really early on, they released their popular training models, which are GPT and GPT-2. GPT-2 for a while, they didn't have it open source, but eventually they did, which meant you or I could go download that. And that was the goal, was like, it's not hidden away. GPT-3 is not open source. That's the one that we're all excited about because it's so good. And controversially, they are now have a subsidiary that is a capped profit company because they realized they can't survive being purely a nonprofit with the amount of resources they needed to make this stuff real. So that's the history and the context of the creators of the ChatGPT we see today. I did forget one key investor. This guy. He who should not be named. So he was one of the co-founders at the very start, and I think he was somewhat pretty active, and he spoke a lot about sort of his vision of like, he thought AI could be really dangerous, and he wanted to create an organization that was to not centralize all the power of the amazing AI in sort of one private entity, but to make it available to everyone. He's stopping actively involved in 2018 because Tesla AI has actually been doing a lot of stuff. Now they're inventing Tesla robots and self-driving, all that stuff. So he's not actively involved, but he is still an investor. But I just think he just seems to pop up everywhere. I mean, honestly. Right? Like, so that was always fun to see. And they're just one of a few competitors. I mean, through the decades, there's been like, I could have like 50 more logos here, right? And there's 1,000 startups in this space. But if you want to look at like, who are the main competitors that have like publishing the most papers or doing the most advanced stuff? Jasper's actually using the OpenAI GPT-3 model that's licensed underneath. There's another company called WriteSonic that generates like content for SEO that does the same thing. But the really big labs are OpenAI, DeepMind, which is a subsidiary of Google now, but is kind of like really intense. They're the ones who made AlphaGo. Who remembers that? Like the tool that could kind of play Go and beat a human. Google, this is really Google Brain, the one in the middle. They actually have a similar tool to ChatGPT called Lambda internally that you can get access via like a private beta, but like I don't know anyone who's gotten access to except for like reporters. And it's supposed to be better, way better, and way more powerful. And they're just terrified to release it because this was the one that got in trouble a few months ago because a guy thought he was sentient, one of the people working on it, and he then got fired by Google because he was like, I think this is too much, this thing is too good. And then he got terrified and they fired him. So that's one. Microsoft's labs, they tend to run a bit more under the radar, and they've been so affiliated with OpenAI that like I think Microsoft Research, but they've released like 17 models. Most recently, the Godel generalized learning model, and they used to have Diallo GPT, and they have one that was based. They partnered with Xiaomi, the company, and they open sourced that one. Like, there's 20,000 of these sort of language models out there, but we just are focused on one. And the final one is what was called FAIR originally, Facebook Advanced AI Research, but is now Meta AI. They famously launched Blunderbot. Who knows that one? Okay, so this last year, just in 2022, they released what was supposed to be a ChatGPT competitor before ChatGPT, and it then went kablooey and started saying, I think it was, this might be a question. It started saying really unsavory things and then had to take it down in like 3 days because, you know, when you talk to humans, it just started saying really like terrible things. So, and that's kind of why the next, like, why can you not use these tools? Like, oh, there's so many competitors, so many spaces, but the ones that we're playing with, right, the really advanced model is one, ChatGPT, right? All these other ones are not that great. And a lot of it's because of fear. These companies are big, and these generative models, you don't know what they're going to say, right? Like, you don't know what ChatGPT is going to say. How many of you have seen ChatGPT be wrong on something? Right. Very confidently, it will tell you things that are incorrect, just like a human. So, so that's why most of these labs are releasing papers and building these models internally and publishing their results or the way they came up with it, but they're not releasing the fully trained model, and they're not releasing public-facing tools because they could say things just like Blunderbot, or there's other products that have done this in the past. It'll say incorrect things, and like when you go to Google, they have a brand they want to protect. Microsoft has a brand. OpenAI is a research lab. They're willing to take more risks. But forget all that. These tools are coming, right? Like not in a lab. They're coming to our real world. And you know, Eric Schmidt, who was the former CEO of Google, has just said like, this is going to be the AI century. I mean, it just by definition is. And that's probably also stoking some of our fears of like, is it going to take our jobs? Is it going to make humans irrelevant? You know, maybe it'll play out in an unexpected way, but this is not staying in the lab anymore. This is going to become real, especially if it's text-based, right? And Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, has talked about how it's like, we are now transitioning to the layer where these models are getting good enough, and there's an exponential leap in every model they create. It's sort of like for years before the iPhone, we all had sort of mobile devices, but they kind of sucked, right? You could get one, and then when we had like one sort of, and it wasn't even just the iPhone's user interface, it was actually the same time as that we got widespread Wi-Fi and we got widespread internet that was fast, right, 3G, and we simultaneously got ARM processors, which are the underlying architecture for mobile processors that got fast enough to do web browsing. And that's when the iPhone came out. Mix those things together, you get an explosion. So with this, we're at that point. We have enough computing power, we have good enough models, that's going to start coming into all of our lives as an everyday thing in the next couple years, not even just the next century. Pop quiz time. In 2016, Microsoft took down a chatbot it named Tay 48 hours after launching it. Why? It returned results explaining how to make illegal drugs, started just glitching and crashing. It said Steve Jobs would win in a fight against Bill Gates. Or D, it praised Hitler. Have you already gone yet?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Praise Hitler?
Yeah, that's the one. Did you guess or did you know that one?
I guessed.
Did you? Okay. Who used Tay in that 48 hours? I think one person spoke to me earlier and said they had played with it, or at least heard it. Okay. You played with it?
No, it was Tay by chance related to Yay.
I don't know.
Yeah?
No. That's kind of funny though. Yeah. But that goes to that point of like every single time, Facebook had something similar happen with Blenderbot, right? From just 2022, that these things go wrong and all these companies are terrified of just like, well, this is powerful, but it keeps going wrong and I don't want to have my reputation damaged.
Was Blenderbot the Twitter one? The one that they
No,
released
Blenderbot
after?
was Facebook. Yeah, yeah. I suppose you could hook it up though. Yeah, praise Hitler. So how does one now tactically do the AI? This is an AI robot. So now we're going to kind of shift gears into talking about like the terminology and some of the nuts and bolts. We're not going to get to code yet. All right, so terminology, right? These all, if you're not initiated, just all seem like common buzzwords. We're just mixing them all together. Machine learning, AI, like Web3, like all this stuff just sort of gets blended together, right? Okay, well, let's make some specific terms. So AI refers to the I'm sorry for the people in the back. I'm guessing you can't read, so I'll read it out loud. Artificial intelligence, as a definition, is AI refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are programmed to think and learn like humans. That's the broad umbrella. So everything is AI. When you get to machine learning, that is a subset of AI of how do you train the machine. And machine learning is a specific subfield of AI that focuses on the development of algorithms and statistical models that enable those machines to improve their performance with experience. So AI is what we want to get to. Machine learning is the mechanism. So AI is the goal of creating general intelligence, while ML is one method to achieve this goal by allowing machines to learn from data. Natural language processing, who's heard of that term? Okay, who could very confidently tell me exactly what that is? Some of you, I expect, yeah. So natural language processing focuses on the interaction between computers and human languages with the goal of enabling machines to understand, interpret, and generate human language. So like machine learning could be done to just like predict fraud and claims, right? But natural language processing is the subset of saying, let's use AI to help it understand language, because language is messy. It doesn't really make sense half the time, even to us. So NL is a specific subfield of AI that focuses on the interaction between computers and human languages. And before I continue, if we look at ChatGPT, it is artificial intelligence. It is using machine learning to train itself. It's using actually unsupervised learning, which we'll talk about in a second. And it is focused on natural language processing. Its inputs and outputs are what look like human language. By the way, all of that was generated by ChatGPT. All of that verbiage that you're reading explaining it was generated by ChatGPT. So when you look into machine learning of how you actually train computers, you have unsupervised learning, which is used when the output is not known and when the goal is to find patterns in data. So it's like read all theses from every college student ever and just understand it. Like you don't tell anything else. And it's like, oh, well, I see these common words and these things, so these must be grouped together. And then we look at it after the fact and we say, oh, this is all theses that were written about nuclear propulsion, right? Like we didn't tell it to do that. It just sort of grouped it automatically together. That's unsupervised learning. Supervised learning is used when the output is known and the goal is to learn the relationship between inputs and outputs. That's like that fraud example. I say, hey, here's 1,000 claims. These 10 were fraud. I give it that data and say, well, learn how do we know that these 10 were fraud, right? Like figure out the patterns in these 10 that made them different from the others. So when I give you the next 10 claims, you can tell me which one is likely to be fraud or not, right? Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So that's supervised learning. Like you give it a cheat sheet ahead of time. And then you tell it, like, based on this cheat sheet, when you look at the next unknown thing, predict the answer, is what you're telling it to do. And then there's reinforcement learning, which doesn't require a lot of data, but it's used when the goal is to learn a policy that maximizes the cumulative reward over time by trial and error. The easiest way to describe this is how children learn. You have a baby, it just does a random thing, and then it's like, oh, that hurt. So it doesn't do it again. Right? Like you don't give it like a textbook of how to be a human. It just sort of like runs into a wall and it's like, that hurt, don't do it again, right? So it does random things and then finds the ones that give it pleasure, and then it does those things more often. So this is where you just have, this is the AlphaGo. This is just, you just set a computer against itself and it keeps learning from the things that worked and didn't work to make itself better. This is where the like crazy sci-fi stuff comes from, which is the stuff it's learning on its own. And DeepMind is the main company that's been really at the forefront of doing this, hence AlphaGo, which is it learned how to play Go. Now, when we talk about ChatGPT, it is primarily based on unsupervised learning. It's basically ingesting the internet to learn how to talk, right? All of that, well, this part was generated by ChatGPT. So in summary, if you didn't get any of that, this is what you have to know. You take billions of items of text, video, and images. You add some brainiac researchers. You lubricate them with coffee, mix in lots of money, and then you get a language model. like GPT-3 by OpenAI, Google's BERT. There's 1,000 others, but these are two really popular ones. And then on top of those language models that the PhDs are creating, you create end user tools that you and I can use. Like that's sort of the funnel, right? That these developers that are really scientists are making language models at the end of the day based on all this sort of patterns of learning, and that model is what we use. It's a model of how to understand the world. It's sort of like a personality in a way, right? Humans learn and they have a brain or a personality. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, pop quiz. In 2017, Google researchers released the paper that created the concept of a transformer language model, or just a transformer model in general. What was it called? Now this is a hallmark. This was like a really freaking big deal. Like this revolutionized all the AIs. This is a whole different way of doing AI that was a really big deal. It's why all the AIs are getting good now. Is this one paper with a whole different way of doing AI. So the A is attention is all you need. B is exploring the limits of transfer learning and natural language processing. C is hierarchical reinforcement learning for multi-agent systems, and D is YOLO. All right, in the back. Yes, you haven't gotten it? It is A. Yes. Have you read this paper? Yes. Okay. It is. I tried reading it. It is. It's not that bad actually. All right. This is where it gets fun because. Oh, and sorry. My bad. I don't. Okay, so I told you the story one time. I hit this guy in the head because it wasn't even this far, and it was much higher. And I realized that the right answer is to like toss it up and down, because at the end the edges will flare into the wind and always carry in an unexpected way. So I tried to add spin to it. But this is just a very long, narrow room. All right. APIs. Now let's get tactical and talk about the APIs you can actually play with from OpenAI. So we've talked conceptually about who did this. We've talked about sort of the technology terms involved and how they relate, right? We've learned about ChatGPT. Now we're going to talk about AIs. But there's a recent update. I'm going to read this because I wrote a lot of text in this. This is the last slide I made. Microsoft is betting the farm on AI, right? So they just opened Azure OpenAI 2 days ago in general availability, where you can pay as a business to have access to all the proprietary OpenAI models as a paid API. They will also open an API to ChatGPT directly. So honestly, if you want to integrate OpenAI stuff, the stuff you're about to see, into your actual app, don't use the OpenAI APIs. Like they're not designed to be production use. But if you're working with Azure, like one of the big three clouds, they are. They're designed to have an SLA. They're not going to cut your access, like all that kind of stuff. You can use that. So I would recommend the stuff I'm showing you is going to use OpenAI's APIs directly. But as of 2 days ago, I would use the Azure stuff, right? All right. So the first one, Davinci 3. This is a model that is a tool that's available to you. It's based on GPT-3. The underlying layer of this is very similar to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is really a layer on top of what's called GPT 3.5, which is not available as of yet publicly. And so this is the fun part. Here's the demo. And this part, I'm going to mirror my screens actually, because there's no way I'm going to see what I'm showing you guys. Wait, why is that a different menu? Displays. All right, mirror. Ah, so much better. Now I can see what you're saying. Okay. Huh? Okay. All right, is this what you guys are seeing? Yeah. All right, I'll blow this up. Okay, I will be honest. I had the idea of doing a live demo like this of the actual tool, and I'll show them the code. Today, I started the code base on writing everything you're about to see and the integration in the last 12 hours. So I'm kind of happy I got this to work. And my idea was, okay, we want to use a generative text model, which is the API that you can give it a prompt and gives you a response, just like ChatGPT, right? The underlying API is available. I created Grumpy GPT. The OpenAI also has, what we're going to see in a second, a image generator called Dolly. That's the second API we got. This image is actually from Dolly. I asked it to, which is an OpenAI tool, to give me a sad, grumpy chatbot. And that's what it gave me. So Grumpy GPT is basically I've given it some prompts to say, hey, please be really like unuseful and annoying and annoyed. So let's say like, what's the weather today? That's kind of helpful. That's not very helpful. But I gave it a bunch of prompts, but they really are tuning this to like not be mean. Like they want it to keep being nice. What else could we ask it? That might give it a grumpy response.
What's the meaning of life?
It's a good one.
I'm sorry. Am I doing the answers?
It's still being super nice.
Will he steal our job?
I know. Tell me a joke. Yeah, I have to still fiddle with the parameters to get this thing to be grumpier. But so this looks like kind of like a shittier version of ChatGPT, right? And the idea is like this is not me using ChatGPT. This is me using an API that like you can sign up for today and building it. So it's very much it's just a Next.js app. How many of you know Next.js if you're developers? Okay. And it's just an API endpoint. So now we're going to jump over to the code and I'll see how best I can blow this up for you guys. There is a presentation mode. All right. So it's effectively rendering this, and essentially the chat log is just rendering each message out, right? There's a form, that's what you're seeing, that input. And at the end, this is kind of, but essentially I'm getting that input, I'm sending it to my own API. And grumpy chat, grump. Yeah, the API. And this is what I'm sending it, right? So when you actually do this without Davinci, I think I can blow this up more. Yeah. You want to give it a base prompt, which is like you want to tell it what you want. ChatGPT, you don't need this, and you give it some sample kind of Q&A. And then when I get the actual request, I'm essentially concatenating what we had on the front end with this base prompt, and then I'm using essentially just their SDK. Like I'm importing from OpenAI, attaching my key, and then creating a configuration object. And then I literally do this part, which is say, hey, please create a completion based on the Davinci 3 model using this prompt. Only give me one answer. And temperature is one of the 5 or 6 configuration parameters. And you're telling it, please be really experimental. Don't be very literal. Like be kind of use examples that might be kind of out of the box. And then max tokens is what's the max number of words I want you to return. Now tokens are important. This is expensive as shit. You pay 2 cents for every 1,000 tokens. So 2 cents per 1,000 words. So you ask it to write you an essay, you're paying a couple pennies for that. And that's why even Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, has said that the current preview and its popularity unexpectedly is costing them an arm and a leg. He called it eye-watering, how much they're spending running it, because it's not really designed. It's very powerful, but not designed to be very efficient yet. But it's also the same pricing Microsoft will give you, so it's not cheap. You can't just like plug it in anywhere you want. But like literally, to get that thing to work, what looks like ChatGPT is that amount of code. Like if you're an experienced developer, you can rig this up in a weekend yourself. Now, what use case you might have might be, yeah, go ahead.
Is this the Azure API or the?
This is not the Azure API. This is the OpenAI direct API. So if you're using Azure, you'd have to like configure it with an Azure key, et cetera. But it's very similar. Like the actual structure of this call, once you get into it, is actually pretty much the exact same. There's like 5 or 6 other parameters you can tune in here. In fact, you can change this end number to say, please give me 3 or 4 responses, and then you can pick between various choices. Again, you pay for all of them. So they would love you to do that. And by default, it is not one choice. It is multiple choices. You can configure the temperature. You can configure sort of like whether you want it to not include the words that are in the prompt as often, or you want to penalize the responses that sound very similar to the question. Or do you want to encourage that? So maybe if you're building a customer service tool, you want to actually keep reusing the words that they're using. But if you want to make like art or fictional essays, you tell it like, no, I don't want you to like say exactly what I'm saying. I want you to like be adventurous. And this part, oh, sorry, question, yeah.
I have 2 questions. First, there's GPT 3.5, but if you ask for GPT 3, it's going to give you the latest.
This is GPT 3. GPT 3.5 is soon going to be available as part of the Azure OpenAI stuff, but it's actually not as of today. You can't use 3.5, which is actually what ChatGPT uses. In fact, they're about to release version 4. So I'd imagine Microsoft is going to rush out actual open access to this stuff. The limitation to them has previously been they need to be able to commercialize this stuff, and they need to be able to run the infrastructure because like GPT-4 is even like has way more parameters than GPT-3 or 3.5. So it makes it very expensive for them to run. And I suppose there's going to be investment in how to like make the runtimes more efficient rather than just how expensive they are today. There are more models, by the way. I'm not going to go through them on today that are not Davinci 3. They're simpler and way cheaper. There's Ada and a few others that are very simplistic. But GPT is the one that is fun and powerful. All right. So that was Grumpy GPT.
Seemed pretty easy to integrate.
It is, and then that's kind of the thing that was surprising to me, which is like, hey, this thing that's really powerful. I'm not going to go into the full screen again. So the next one is Dolly. Yeah.
Sorry, before we move on, I noticed for GPT-3 or ChatGPT, there's a limitation. It doesn't use any data before 2021.
Yes.
Is that a limitation that's going to be going on forward, or do you foresee?
Yeah. So three and 3.5, and the ChatGPT as well, which is like a layer on top of it, is only up to 2021. I'm assuming that 4, which they haven't said yet, should be newer than that. So that's not like a limitation they're putting artificially. That's because they haven't been able to like essentially design the model that way. So I assume when they release 4, it'll be more up to date. Lambda, the one I told you that's really powerful, is actually like is basically up to date, but just you can't use it. It's the one they thought was sentient. So yeah. So the answer there is that GPT-3 will probably not be up. I think retrained or whatever, but 4 will be. That's my understanding at least. So Dolly is an image generator. Who's played with Dolly before? Okay. So if you went to the website, right? So Dolly, the reason there's Wall-E up there is that's why they call it Dolly. They named it after, they mixed Wall-E, the sort of character from the Pixar movie, with Salvador Dali, the painter, and because it kind of makes really expressionistic kind of art. Yeah. So there's another demo. I was kind of thinking of like, how do I make this into a fun little app we can kind of use as a showpiece? And I think I got this one. I think it's going to make us a lot of money.
I think it's going to cost you a lot of money.
I have a cap. I put a cap on, and I put a very specific cap on that'll like warn me. In fact, I don't think I'll leave these demos up indefinitely.
Are you getting our data from this?
Huh?
Are you getting any data from this?
No. I mean, it's essentially like I have to take what the prompt is and send it to OpenAI to get an image back, right? Or to enter the chat in. So I'm actually not storing the chats anywhere. The chats are only being stored on the last demo. They're only sitting in your browser. I'm very curious as to the cost of my bill at the end of this talk.
I was wondering, where did the team get like all the data? Like, how did they?
For GPT-3? I feel like I remember. I think they literally scraped a lot of Reddit. Is I think one of the primary sources. I'm not shitting you. That's actually what they did. Their embeddings model, which we'll talk about in a second, they actually scraped Amazon food reviews up to 2012. So I think it's Google's probably scraping the internet. That they already have to know how to do that. But I think for GPT-3, one of the biggest sources was they trained on Reddit. Yeah.
Well, that's terrifying.
I'm doing that by memory. Did I say that wrong? Did anyone in the audience know if that's corroborate that? Okay. Then it's Reddit, because yeah. Go ahead.
I think they also use Twitter, and after OpenAI is like, no, we're not going to be just open source, then Elon Musk is like, nope, we can't use Twitter anymore.
Okay. So I think at some point they used Twitter as well. But I'm just going by memory. I think GPT-3 specifically, because it's a closed source, was probably a mixture of things, but I do know that Reddit was a big source. Which sounds funny, but you just need a lot of text. You need a lot of people's conversations to make things sound real, and that's a good source for that. Okay, so let's talk about this demo. The $1 billion idea. That image also generated by Dolly itself. I asked it to give me an image of a machine that spits out money, and it gave me that. So you cook the thing. This takes longer, so I put a loader on it. Ergonomic soft towels could be a product. I'll tell you what's happening as just a user here. What's actually happening is how many of you are actually developers? Okay. So if you've ever done testing, right, you can use like fake data generators, right? Like fake names, fake emails, fake product names. So this is like a library called Falso that generates fake products. It's like a fun thing for using your test data. And then I'm basically grabbing a fake product name and then sending it and saying, give me an image of that fake product. That's how it's actually working. So if we generate another one, generic plastic keyboard. Some of them get. I want to find a funny one because it's like those are not that crazy. I think I got one like really soft, fuzzy frying pans. Was one of them, and it actually did. Or like rubber bicycles was like another one it generated when I was playing with it. Yeah, so that's what it's doing. Steel towels. Yeah, so essentially we take this fake product name that comes from a testing library, right? And then we set it out and say, give me an image of that. That's what we're doing. And if we look at the code real quick, essentially, huh?
Is it faker?
It's Falso the library. Faker.js has a thing where like it was weirdly not, I just had local issues where it would error with Next.js 13. And so I was just like, I'll just find another one. So the $1 billion idea. Again, I'm not going to go through all the code. If you're a React developer, you're looking at some of it. We have the overview, the button, and the display. So if you go into the button, essentially, I am calling my own API to say, hey, please give me a $1 billion idea. And if I then go to, I'll show you the backend that's actually interacting with the $1 billion API. So in my API, the reason we're not making these calls from the front end, by the way, is that like the key to talk to OpenAI is a secret. You don't want to make that public on the internet. So I have to hit my API to then do the work of talking to OpenAI. So like it's my browser to my own API, which is then talking to OpenAI to keep my credentials to OpenAI secret. Yeah.
What are you using to host the API?
Just Vercel, which is it's just a sort of a platform to serverlessly host and quickly put up websites. You can use it for production too, but it's made by the makers of Next.js, so it was very kind of a seamless way to put up the demo. And this is, again, we're using that same OpenAI client. And I'll zoom in for you guys again a little bit. We're getting a random product name, right, from the testing library. We're saying our OpenAI config that's hooked up to our API key. We're just prompting it with that product name. We're saying, give me one result with size of 512 by 512. I just get the image URL back, and then I send back to my front end the name of the product and the URL. And it's showing the image from the URL provided by OpenAI. 5 lines of code to do that, right? The rest of it's all just the syntax of making the UI kind of like stylistically pretty, right? So some of you aren't developers, but like that's not a whole lot of logic to make that thing, right? It's expensive, but not a lot of logic. And if anyone makes $1 billion, you gotta give me a cut, obviously, from this chat. So. I'm going to put up a QR code, but if any of that's something you want to play with yourself, I have put up essentially the code to the stuff I just made and showed you, and you can grab it from here. At the end of the presentation, I'll put up a QR code where you guys can go to this URL if you don't want to grab it right now. Yeah, okay. Embeddings. So this is sort of I have a hard time explaining this and even understanding it. It's a classification and search API. It's trained on the Amazon.com food reviews. It's not that great. They keep updating it, but like essentially it can do sentiment analysis. It can help you do search. It can help you do recommendations. You give it a bunch of text and it's able to kind of create essentially a vector for each word, and then you can use it to do other things with that. So yeah, we'll do a demo, or we won't. Haha. I don't understand this one, so I don't do a demo. You guys get rickrolled, but maybe you can explain it.
Yeah, so if I can explain what I
So that's the use case I kept seeing was like recommendations, search, et cetera. Because if you could take like a paragraph and make essentially an embedding, which will give you essentially what looks like gobbledygook, it's a reference of vectors and numbers, and then you can do things with that. So it's a representation of what would be words, and but it is. My understanding also from they tout it, but there's very similar APIs from all the big cloud vendors that do similar, at least for those end goals, do similar things. And so far, I have not read that this has made a huge dent where they've been able to surpass other APIs from Google or Amazon or Azure in this space for the use cases they're intended. But I think there's still like maybe use cases we haven't figured out or ways to use this we haven't figured out. So code, as I promised, if you want to get the code to what I showed you. so you can run your own bill and not use my bill when you're running those things.
So do we have to actually provide like payment information when we sign up?
So when you sign up for an OpenAI account, I don't think initially have to, and then you get a very small kind of limited free tier. And then if you want to use above that, you have to enter a card, and then I think it's like you buy credits in like $15 increments. Yeah.
$15.
That was the cheapest I saw. Yeah, I think that's all I loaded. And I told it to like hard cap. So, all right. That is the presentation. I love this gift. All right. Before I fully let you go, I have one bonus. All right. I made a video. I will read this one out loud. I asked them, what is a good trivia question to ask the audience in a talk about AI and ChatGPT? And then it answers, what's the name of an open source AI language model developed by OpenAI that's capable of generating blah, blah text? And then I say, essentially, what's the answer to that? Can I speed this up? Yeah, I can. Good. And it tells me the answer is GPT-3. And I was like, that's too easy. Give me something harder. What is the name of the neural network architecture that GPT and other transfer models are based on as introduced in 2017 paper? What's that answer? It's going to just be Transformer. And I was like, okay, still way too easy. This was, the ones you guys actually answered, I did actually write, but I was literally like, maybe they can help me actually write the trivia questions. I say it's still way too easy. And then it says, what's the name of the process that GPT-3 uses to generate text? And is the answer unsupervised learning? And then it actually schools me, or it's like, no, the answer is autoregression. Autoregression is a full type of self-referential prediction, blah, blah. And I did not make that a question, but because I thought this video would be more interesting. Okay, that's the one I'm going to use. Great, I'm glad I could help you. So that's your last trivia question, courtesy of ChatGPT itself.
Wait, if they were so easy, why you asked for what the answer was?
Well, I wanted to confirm that the answer I thought of was actually the correct one. All right, so this is how you guys can contact me if you want to. I'll take questions at this point. But I will also probably more than leave this slide up. I'm just going to leave this slide up, which is this is the QR code for the slides if you want them. So anyone wants to ask questions, right? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So like ChatGPT, like GPT itself is not open source, but Stable Diffusion or Stability AI is open source. Does that mean
Yeah.
you can see their code for how they do everything? Spell that open source means?
I mean, if it's open source, that means the model is open source, which means like you can look at the AI model, but it doesn't mean that like they're not giving you a runtime, and almost all these models have to be tuned into actually use in the real world. So that's going to answer like open source, meaning like the Goodell model by Microsoft is literally there's a GitHub repo where you can go and grab it. And to run it, like you'll have to install Python and install a whole bunch of stuff to actually like run it, and it's not really usable unless you're kind of a researcher that knows how to configure and tune it. Would that be accurate? That's the way I kind of understand, because you're more in the field directly.
Yeah, so depends on what do they open source. They usually either open source the source code or the parameters of the model.
Yeah.
Depending on who is what. But in order to train a model, you have to spend more than $500,000.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
Is there any caveats to using OpenAI's API as opposed to Android?
So OpenAI, when I kept reading, like they kept saying like they don't really want you to use this for production workloads unless you have a license with them. So like WriteSonic and Jasper use the GPT-3 model, and then they run it on their own infrastructure under a license and they configure it. Azure does have an SLA. I don't know at this point if like OpenAI has said like, no, you can connect to this and actually make it usable for production. I have read that people have been kicked off of it without much warning. And there's rate limits. So my understanding is that if you want to build a product that's not more than you playing around with it, I would not build it on OpenAI's infrastructure directly. I would use the Azure stuff, and there's not a pricing benefit. So for mine, the pricing is pretty much the same. So I would just say, just use the Azure ones. Now that they're generally available. It was 2021 when they opened the OpenAI preview because they have an exclusive deal with OpenAI. So, but now anyone can use it. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Hopefully that was interesting to you guys. And I'll be around for a bit. Now I'll switch gears to the sort of organizer mode. Feel free to hang out for a bit here. At some point, if we have too many people hanging out and they have to sort of clean out the space and get it back to ready for their work the next day. If you still want to hang out, we'll kind of announce it and we can head over to Score on King and keep talking there. But other than that, thank you for coming. If you're interested in speaking, let me know. I'm always happy to take questions in general, and hope to see you. We are hoping to do another event next month, which is actually going to be a different venue. We do need a speaker for that one. That'll be at the Lubio office, which is over in Kensington Market. It's a beautiful space. Being very gracious, and they'll have like food and drinks and stuff as well. So hope to see you there.